Develop the necessary relationships to inculcate emotional intelligence into our children? And is there anything more important? A chassid once came to the Rebbe, and he said, "I don't understand it. I've turned myself inside out to make myself into a mensch, and to live as a good person. And my children, they're so far away from where I am in terms of their values. They're driving me crazy. And I was told, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. What's the story?" And so the Rebbe looked at him with great empathy and understanding and said, "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, except when there are storms. And the times that we're living in are more than storms. I would say that they're number 5 kind of hurricanes, 0.5 hurricanes, and our children are growing up in a world that's really very different from the world that you and I grew up in. So how do we inculcate emotional intelligence in children who are overstimulated, filled with computer games and scary news, who rush all the time to get to the places they need to get to, and even those moments that we just took for granted as being beautiful times for communication, like carpool, have been usurped by text messages and telephone calls and maybe even 2 video machines in the car playing simultaneously because the guy sitting on the right doesn't like listening to what the guy sitting on the left has. Where do we develop the necessary relationships to inculcate emotional intelligence into our children? And is there anything more important in our relationship with our children than working on exactly that? The Rebbe said that the most important thing that we can teach our children is that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, and that all our deeds are written in a book. And he didn't mean that, the Rebbe didn't mean that in a scary way. Be careful, no matter what you're doing, Hashem is watching you. I think that the Rebbe meant it in a far more positive way. All the little things that you do that are kind and nice that you think go unnoticed aren't really unnoticed. Hashem sees them, Hashem appreciates them, and Hashem writes them in his book. So I'd like to spend a little while too talking about what I call the 7 C's of child rearing. So put on your seatbelt, a little suntan lotion, because we're going to get on our sailboat and sail the 7 C's of child rearing together. The first C is calm, and I've spoken about that in other workshops on emotional intelligence, but the idea of presenting a calm external, a calm front to your children, even when you're not feeling calm inside. There are many kinds of Academy Awards for Best Actors, but this is the award for the Best Supporting Actor, because there's no greater support that you can give to your child than the message that it's all right. We're in control. We can handle the world that we've been placed in, and that Hashem doesn't give us any tests that are greater than we can handle. We get exactly what it is we're meant to, and now all we have to do is figure out how to deal with it peacefully, calmly, constructively. When a parent yells at a child, raises their voice, shows excitement, basically what they're showing the child is not power, not strength, and not control, but a lack of control, weakness. And they pass on that lack of control to the child. The child needs to learn equanimity, that everything's fine, I have control of my emotions, and calm also brings a child a sense of bitachon. If you show a child in a difficult situation that you're calm, basically you're giving them the message, I trust in Hashem. This is the world I live in is a safe place, and that's very, very important for a child to know, to understand. I like to tell parents, there are tools that you can use. There are things that you can write. You can put them on your refrigerator. You can put them on your mirror. You can write them with your non-dominant hand, which is a whole nother class, but it's very interesting. We have non-dominant handwriting is basically using your other hand, which is the hand that hasn't been trained. It's the hand that's actually kind of more connected to your inner child. And it says the research has shown that when you write something with that hand, you're now using your entire brain to think of something that you might have done more automatically, and that it actually penetrates more deeply. So I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions of things that you might write with your non-dominant hand, or write with lipstick on your mirror. Just don't write it with blood on your wall, because you're supposed to be a calm parent, right? and one of them is that many parents are facing exactly what I'm facing. It's average. This is what I'm meant to, expect from my children. Children are the natural saboteurs of adult plans. Of course they're making it difficult. That's what Hashem put them here to do. And this is distressing, but it's not dangerous. That's a big one. It never ceases to amaze me. I can be involved in a conflict with my children where I feel that I have the upper hand, I have control, because I've kind of gone into it from a calm place. And they might have done something, pretty not nice to their sibling or to a friend, and I have the calm and the objectiveness to be able to talk to them about how they could have handled it perhaps, or better yet, to get them to tell me how they could have handled it better. That's always better. And I'm so lovely, calm, wonderful. And then another child will spill orange juice, like innocently, and all of a sudden, where did my calm go? I completely lost it because I lost control. It was a surprise. It was a shock. And so the two children who did something that was like a level 8 on my list of no-nos, I was able to handle perfectly, sweetly, calmly, and gently. This one over here who spilled the orange juice, which was a level 1, I blew it. I lost it. Why? It came as a surprise. It made me lose my own feeling of control or competence. And so telling myself, this is distressing, not dangerous, when I see something that I perceive as dangerous, is often very helpful in allowing me to continue to model the calm that I'd like my children to learn. Another nice thought is, how will I feel about this in 10 years? Sometimes, we find ourselves embroiled in a situation with the kids. We're trying to get someplace and we're late, or they can't find their shoes, or they left the tops off the magic markers, and we just bought them, and this is so frustrating, when are you ever going to learn responsibility, etc., and so forth. In 10 years from now, am I really going to remember that they left the tops off the magic markers? Is it worth losing my equanimity, my calm, my behavior that I want them to model because of the magic markers? It's a triviality. Another good line. Measure the discomfort on a scale from 1 to 10. How big is it really? And I might say that a number of these little aphorisms are things that I learned through the work that I did with Miriam Adahan. I don't want to take credit for them entirely myself. But how is it a catastrophe or is it a small thing? And if it's a small thing, what's the most important lesson my child can learn? To pick up his socks from the floor, to be dutiful, or to be a mensch, to have the emotional intelligence that he's going to need to maintain friendships, to maintain a beautiful, loving relationship with his spouse, to maintain a job. It's really all about, or significantly about, emotional intelligence, and calm is probably one of the biggest ones. Hashem wants progress, not perfection. And it says that, it takes 70 years for a person to really fulfill their potential. And so, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old who's being annoying, driving you up the wall, so to speak, is he expected to be a finished product? No. Is there a way that you could figure out to help him to have a little bit more self-control today than he did yesterday? A little bit more empathy for the people that he's disturbing. And that's where, being solution-oriented instead of emotion-oriented is going to help us tremendously in working with our children, and that's all about calm. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but I just wanted to quote, while we're on the topic of speaking to your child softly and calmly, King Solomon said, "The words of sages are heard when they are spoken in calm." So basically, the wisest of all men taught us that hysteria or shouting doesn't enter the heart as well as quiet words. And in the Ramban's letter to his son, in his recipe for rebuke, he said, you should speak gently, using soft speech, and you should let it be known that the rebuke that you're giving is stimulated by love and concern. The second C in my 7 C's is consistency. It's very, very empowering for a child to have a sense of routine, a sense of seder. In Hasidus, it says that a Hasid is a Masuder. He knows how his day is going. He knows what's expected next. I always am so bowled over when I go to the Chabad headquarters in New York, and it's 3:15, which is when the Rebbe always davened mincha. I'll get there at like 3:10, and the place looks kind of a little bit empty, like nothing's really going on. There's groups of people learning in various areas. All of a sudden, by 3:14, there's people streaming in from every place to daven mincha, because that was the time that the Rebbe always davened mincha. And that sense of orderliness, that sense of routine, is important for us as adults, and it's very important to start to develop that sense of routine in our children. It actually empowers them like a GPS when you're driving that says in 0.6 miles you are going to bear to the right. Well, that's great because you feel calm instead of lost while you're driving, and you know where you're about to go. So when children know, that when they come home from school, there's always a healthy snack on the table, or when children know that, right after dinner is bath time, and then as soon as you're finished, I'll take you into your room and read you a story, and they can count on it, it gives them that same security as your GPS. It gives them a sense of empowerment. It makes them more effective. It's also nice to make plans with your kids so that their daytime routine or their weekly routine is something that they feel that they have a voice in as well. I love the concept of family meetings. And I like the idea of family meetings that include the 2-year-old as well as the 5-year-old as well as the 13-year-old, where everybody gets a little voice on what's going to be for dinner on Tuesday night, or what do you want to do on Sunday, or what kind of project should we take on around the house, or what should we really work on this week in terms of being kind to each other. Should we make this week a no name calling week? Let's take a vote. And when the kids, sense that they have a voice, that they have a little power in their family situations, they buy in more. They're more willing to cooperate because it's not just something that's coming from the top down. It's something where they're getting a choice. The choices, going to the closet and taking out 2 outfits that you're perfectly comfortable with, and saying to your child, would you like this one or this one, allows them the power and the freedom to make their own choices when they're young. The idea of putting food in the center of the table and teaching children how much is appropriate for them to take rather than scooping it onto their plate is another very simple suggestion for emotional intelligence. Why? Because they, are learning to make choices in terms of control, in terms of their intake of food, which amazingly, I think I learned 252 times a day we think about food. So how much of our when somebody talks about self-control and willpower, what's almost the first thing that you think about? A diet, right? Overeating, what have you. So this food choice is a very big trigger, and teaching kids that look around the table, see how many people are sitting here. Look at the plate of food. Could you divide that with your eyes to how many people are at the table so that you could figure out exactly how much you could have if you wanted it? You don't have to take that much, but try not to take more than that because you're part of a group. Imagine if the world was run by people who thought that way. Imagine if that's how people felt in the Arab countries right now about the little piece of the platter that belongs to us. Can you take what belongs to you and remember that there's other people around and that they have feelings and that they want to eat too? So that's great in terms of giving kids a voice and in terms of consistency. Another thing in terms of consistency that I think is very, very important, and it's also an emotional intelligence issue, it is a very physical thing, learning how to take care of their things, learning how to take care of the environment, learning how to be responsible, accountable, to be committed to doing something as a part of a group. So housework or keeping the car clean or going through a notebook at night before you go to sleep and getting rid of the things you don't need. It all seems like it's very physical, but really it's very emotional. It's about learning organizational tools. It's about being responsible, and it's about feeling control. It's interesting in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, what seemed to be such trivial or material things to you and I, like cooking and cleaning, were exactly the jobs that were given to the Kohanim. What did the Kohanim do? They prepared the sacrifices. They cooked the meat. They swept the altar. So they in fact used to really compete about who was going to sweep the ashes off of the incense altar. That was a great honor. They washed clothing. You had Kohanim walking around in white garments who were doing sacrifices all of the time. You don't have to use your imagination to figure out how often the laundry had to be done. So exactly the things that we might think of as being menial tasks were things that were filled with spirituality, and that's something that we can teach our children, that doing the work and doing it with the right attitude and the right sense of responsibility is a spiritual task, and it's an emotional task, and it's something that helps to equip us for life as things move on. Careful, that's the next C, and by careful, I think that it means that we have to be careful about what we expose our children to. Careful about media. Careful about the things that we say. It used to be years ago that people would say, not in front of the kinder. This is not a discussion to have in front of the kinder. I think that expression is getting used less and less. So that I think that today's children can pretty much tell you what the politics are in shul. I think they can pretty much tell you which teacher's about to be fired. They can tell you, who's got issues in their business at this point in the community. How did they hear it? How did they learn it? Because perhaps we're not so careful about what we say in front of the children. Maybe we're in a rush, and we feel like, or maybe we think that they don't hear what we're saying. But there is no greater teacher for a child than his parents' actions, and they pick up on everything. I've seen little girls standing in front of the mirror, posing in a way that only a grown woman can understand, looking at herself to see whether she's presentable to go outside. And these little girls will take their purses and sling them over their shoulders and wave their hair and make sure that they're looking like these little models. Where did they learn it from? They learned it from watching their mothers. So what is it that we need to remember in terms of being careful with our children? We need to remember that that it's okay for us to be actors. It's far better to have an insincere gesture of love or acceptance than a sincere gesture of disgust, and that our kids are going to learn how to judge other people, how to speak to their spouse, how to categorize the importance of their school and their teachers from the things that they hear us say. We're the models. We are the models. And sarcasm and negativity are, I think, some of our biggest pitfalls. Commitment, that's our fourth C. Probably in terms of the biggest no-no in my mind in terms of child rearing, aside from telling kids what's wrong with them instead of what's wrong with their actions, is making a promise and not following through. It's far better to not make any promises than to make empty promises and not deliver. Because every time we change the rules or give ourselves permission to not live up to commitments or expectations that we've articulated, we're giving our children a very serious message. Words don't really mean anything. If words don't really mean anything, then what is it that's going to allow us to commit, to communicate, and to cooperate? The fifth C is cheerful, and there's a great story. My in-laws are David and Gittel Lazarson. David is a award-winning teacher and quite a celebrity in his own right. When he was going to the Lubavitcher Rebbe before he got married for a blessing, the Rebbe gave him a blessing that he and his wife should merit to raise their children together in a good mood. And he thought to himself, what is this? That's the best he can say to me? Now, 30 years and many children later, he understands that there's no bigger blessing than that he could possibly have asked for. Because despite the mistakes that we make and the shortcomings that we have as individuals, if we give our children the message that we're happy with our lives, that we're happy with, who we've committed to be, then we have so much more credibility in asking them to be more like us. Because if we're miserable and we say, no, but you have to do what I'm doing, it's important for you to, go to shul like daddy, or it's important for you to be careful about dressing modestly like mommy, so that you can be miserable like us when you grow up. There's not, it's not a very impactful statement. It's not so convincing. But if we make it our business to make our Shabbos table cheerful, to make our preparations for the holidays happy, to show excitement, to show gratitude, to say to your kid when you get into the car, instead of texting your best friend who you could have talked to all day while your kid was in school, right? And say, so what happened in school today that was good? And, or at dinner time, give everybody the opportunity to share something nice that happened that day, something wonderful. And get your kids into the habit, and you should, of course, say something that you think was wonderful that day too, but get your kids into the habit of articulating the good, being cheerful, being positive, and being grateful. So the sixth C in our sailing the seas of child rearing is compassion. Sometimes you don't know whether to hug a child or to punish him. If you punish him when he needs a hug, you've made a serious mistake. But if you hug him when he should have been punished, you've just brought some extra love into the world. I love that guideline. That's a guideline that is brought down by Tzvi Freeman in his book, Bringing Heaven Down to Earth. And it's a quote from the values of the Rebbe. Before a child is 7, you can assume that most of his misbehavior is just a matter of impulsivity, that he's bored, he's overexcited, he's hungry, he's tired, he's insecure, and that maybe he just doesn't have the words to express his emotions. I was babysitting for one of my cutest grandchildren the other night, and about half an hour into some conversation we were having, he came over and he punched me in the nose. And, there were all kinds of responses that I could have had at that moment. I think that, he was trying to say something like, you need to stop talking, Bubby, I just want to play. And he didn't know how to say it. So in working with our kids, it's better to make mistakes to err on the side of kindness than it is on the side of strictness. I could have demanded respect at that moment. What would it have done? He would have alienated himself from me. He would have gone to the other side of the room and been angry at me for the rest of the night. I said to him, is there something you want to tell me? Or maybe you don't even know what it is you want to tell me. Maybe I'll give you some choices. Am I talking too much? Are you tired? Are you hungry? And then once we got to, I'll take a drink. I said, oh, that's a good solution. I said, next time you feel like that, try and say it in words, because it really hurts when you hit me on the nose. And I gave him a hug, and that was the end of it. I think he learned something from that would be a lot greater than if I hit him back, And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the gradual steps towards creating a mensch. It doesn't happen in a minute. It doesn't happen from fear, although respect is a good thing to have in our relationships with our children. And it doesn't happen from us responding personally to the situation, meaning we need to drop the dafka. When a child upsets you, chances are they're not doing it deliberately, or they don't even have you in mind when they're doing whatever it is that's upsetting. So taking a few steps back, using what I call the mental helicopter, and looking at the big picture, or even imagining your best friend or your mother or the ideal role model that you have being in the room and taking a video of you as you're interacting with your child. Think about, this kid did something that was really annoying. How can I exercise compassion to teach him how to change his behavior? And if I can't teach him, so at this moment in time, so the best thing for me to do is just forget it. If you can't fix it, forget it. And you have to learn, yourself to be able to articulate what's bothering you in a way that's assertive but not aggressive. And then you can teach your children the same thing. When you do X, I feel Y. That's a great one. And have, you can even make a flashcard like that for your kids when they're really angry about something that says, when he does X, I feel Y. Okay? And then the kid starts to learn, there are words. There's a way to talk about what's bothering me. And there are people who want to listen to me. And I like it when people listen to me. And I want to grow up to learn how to listen to people. It's gradual, but it will happen. The world is built by kindness. That's what it says in Tehillim. And in terms of our relationships with our children, I think I read that we spend about 16 minutes of quality time with our children a day. And we spend a lot of time saying, pick up your toys, you're going to be late, let's go, brush your teeth, time for bed, stop fighting with your brother, don't you just spilled that, blah, blah, blah. We're always talking, and then there's all of these interruptions, and there's the text messages, and there's the kids like this. I love the pictures of the tables like this. The whole family is sitting together. It's so wonderful. Thank God for Shabbos. That's all I can say. But how do you break through all of that? We break through it with kindness. Think about things that your kid would really like you to do for them. And build a bank account. Keep making deposits so that when you need to make a withdrawal and say, okay, you did something that was totally unacceptable, you have the position to do it. How? How do you do that? Find the time to spend quality time with your kids. Try and find a way to take one-on-one time with each kid. And for some of us, that's a big order. When you have 6, 7, or 8 or more kids, that's a big order. But I once went on a cruise, and there was a grandmother on the boat, and she was cruising with her 15-year-old granddaughter, and she told me, she said, I have 8 grandchildren, and 4 weeks out of every year, I reserve for spending time with each one of them individually. So it kind of is an every other year thing, but I take each one on a cruise, or I take them on a road trip. And she said, you know what? I should have been so smart when I was a mother. So, I think more than anything in the world, the greatest gift that we can give to our children is our time, to listen to them, to have eye contact with them, to let them know how important they are to us so that they don't have to act out to get our attention. I remember Rebbetzin Youngrice once told a story about a woman who came to her who was really afraid to have children. And she said, come on, let's talk about it. And the woman said, growing up, my mother was the most amazing hostess. She used to make 7 salads, 10 salads every time we had company for dinner. And the house was always perfect. She said, but you know what I remember the most about my mother? I remember her back. So turn around, face your kids. When they ask you something that you don't have time to answer, say, that was a really important question. I need some more time to think about it. Right now I'm rushing, but it means a lot to me, and I want to give you the right answer. It only takes a second to have the presence of mind, the attitude to do that, and that's how we teach our child commitment, compassion, kindness. And the last of the C's is celebration. And what do I mean by celebration? I learned once, or more than once in my psychology texts, that anything that's mentioned gets repeated. So focus on bringing the spotlight to the good things that your kids do. Have a salsa and chips party because you heard that Shmuley was really kind to his friend in the playground that day, or have an ice cream party because Rivka cleaned her room without anybody asking her to, and get everybody involved in it, and give them an accolade for, wow, you did something that was great, and I want to take the time to celebrate it with you. I have a son who, Baruch Hashem, has become like a really exemplary scholar and outreach personality, a chevra mensch, as we say in French. And I can tell you exactly where the turning point was in his life. He had a difficult time in elementary school, and he went away to school in Minnesota. I have to give kudos to the Friedman family for this one. And he got an award for being the student of the month because he kept his commitments. He kept his Seder. It wasn't that he was brilliant. He's pretty smart, but that wasn't it. That's not the most important thing. Smart is never the most important thing. And that's why it says in the Torah, it doesn't say, I've set before you today smart and dumb, choose smart. It says, I've set before you today good and evil, choose good. So far more important than the smart is the good, is the emotional intelligence, not the IQ. Anyway, so here was my son. He was a brand new student in this school in Minnesota, and the first 6 weeks of the year had gone by, and he was the student who got the award for always showing up on time. He always came to class, he was always committed, he was always ready, 100% attendance, his books were where they needed to be, etc. and so forth. And as a reward, when it was time to go to the airport for vacation, they had a stretch limousine. And they took a picture of my son in front of this stretch limousine as the student of the month. And for some reason, because Hashem loves him, I guess, this picture got onto one of the big Chabad websites, and it said, Yigal Rosenberg, I shouldn't have named his name, but he'll forgive me, student of the month, and there he was in front of the stretch limousine, and people, when he came home for that vacation, started calling him from all over the country. Whoa, I hear you're like this superstar, this amazing student, blah, blah. I want you to know that turned him around and made him not just an average kid, but an awesome kid, and it was all because of that celebration of acts of self-control that you and I expect, but we don't talk about it when kids do what we expect. We talk about it when they don't do what we expect. So let's turn it around. Let's celebrate with our children, and you should all merit to raise your children in a good mood. Thank you.